一人分一互相支援。
好。好，我好。
请杰，我问你，你等下还会进去？
怎么了？
你就收了？
没有行程，不一样，3题。对。
哦，你是做中东？哦。
你们自己分配哦，我不阻止你们。
我以为你做主警。
我是先问钱。
哦，我不阻止你们。你们自己喊距离，抓距离。好。对。他会从电梯这边转过来，
这样子转还是从这边？
他会转过来啊，
转过来，
对，转过来，
这边上，然后转过来，转过来，
看你们。可是我觉得他听不见，太远。要不要他到红龙城那边啊？红龙城那边啊？对啊，红龙
前端。
对，
就是那个安全门再过去一点。
对，不然我怕他想回你，但他听不懂你在讲。对。
就没得可。
除非你要嘶吼。口腔这样，
可以，我声音很大。
对，口腔。
要下烂。
就今天新闻本来就会变成你这样，现场疑似被记者吓到，
那就被肉搜。
我会被肉搜。
应该是不会啊，还好。
只是想说这个记者声音多大。就可以接也可以。
就每天演那个小姑娘。
你可以开团购微信，然后团购一个
锅碗瓢盆，
对啊，大锅盆，
然后再把这个里面投开入
对，刀具，
然后创意料理，无菜单料理，
你们都帮我规划好了。
对啊，拜托。
这厨具很多，
高级，200多。
真的好贵哦。
还有洗碗机、瓦斯炉、抽油烟机一整套，光一个厨房
慢慢讲，搬一个有那个超大厨房，
然后就可能会留下空起来都换一页，就是厂商找来私下换一页。
厂商联络。
到了下，
预备备。
排的哦，第一排的，因为后面有摄影机，麻烦第一排的蹲下，谢谢。
就在你眼前。
那一位，挡住了。
前面的。
大哥，结果。
谢谢。院长，公共形势上涨，物价可能上升，行政院有因应措施吗？上礼拜在听摩卡，然后李玉婷还发现，对，李玉婷还给我发出。
话都先蕊过，因为这种顺都会卡住。
对啊，那个 timing 很难抓。
而且前几天练习怎么顺，到当下就是有时候就是打起，
脑袋就出不来。中国前市上涨物价比对。院长，中东情势升温，行政院对物价上涨有因应措施吗？
租屋补贴经费怎么办？民众都很担心。
这是不是二次打脸刘世芳部长？
你会一直在后面偷笑，后面这样。
谁偷笑？
你会知道有吗？他就不知道是不是偷笑就这样。笑话讲完了，谢谢啊。
个性，感谢。
对。
各位贵宾，大家好，大家早安，欢迎各位莅临2025大师论坛。我是今天的 CEO Rebecca 佩硕。Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2025 Master Forum. I'm your MC today. My name is Rebecca. 我们今天的论坛是由经济日报、华南金控以及合作金库银行共同主办，协办单位包括了富邦金控、富兰克林华美投信、国泰世华银行以及亚洲大学。So the forum today is proudly co-hosted by the Economic Daily News, Huanan Financial Holdings, and Taiwan Cooperative Bank. And our supporting partner including Fubon Financial and Franklin Templeton CNOM Securities Investment Management, and also Cathay United Bank and Asia University. 那我们在今天论坛正式开始之前，先为各位介绍今天莅临现场的长官贵宾，还有我们的讲者。So right now in the very beginning, I would like to introduce the guests of honors and our speakers who are here with us today. Please wave your hands as I mention your names. 首先，我们要欢迎行政院的卓荣泰院长，卓院长帮我们大家挥挥手。Please welcome Mr. 卓荣泰 Premier of Executive Yuan. Welcome. 以及行政院龚明鑫秘书长， Please welcome Dr. 明信公 Secretary General of Executive Yuan， 欢迎。接着也欢迎财政部庄翠云部长，欢迎庄部长。Ms. 翠云庄 Minister of Ministry of Finance， 以及行政院李惠芝发言人 Ms. Michelle Lee Spokesperson of Executive Yuan， Welcome。那当然，接下来要为各位介绍今天论坛的大师，这是来自伦敦政治经济学院经济学教授披萨里德斯教授。Please welcome Professor Christopher Pizzaridis, Professor of Economics at the London School of Economics, our master today of our Master Forum. Of course, welcome. 接下来也欢迎我们华南金控李耀清总经理。Please welcome Mr. Robert Lee, Director and President of 华南 Financial Holdings. 以及台湾经济研究院吴中书董事长 ，Please welcome Dr. 钟书吴 ，Chairman of Taiwan Institute of Economic Research。接下来欢迎和库金控集团首席经济学家暨和库投顾徐千婷董事长，欢迎。Please welcome Dr. 千婷徐 ，Chief Economist of Taiwan Cooperative Financial Holdings Group and Chairperson of Taiwan Cooperative Securities Investment Consultancy. Welcome. 接下来欢迎华南投顾吕仁杰董事长，欢迎吕董事长。Mr. Jerry Liu, Chairman of 华南 Securities Investment Management Company Limited。接下来欢迎亚洲大学蔡进发校长。Please welcome Dr. Jeffrey J.P. Tsai, President of Asia University。以及我们经济日报刘永平社长 ，Mr. Alvin Liu, President of Economic Daily News. Welcome。我们非常感谢各位嘉宾，还有我们现场所有的与会贵宾今天的莅临，跟我们一同开启知识和智慧的交流之旅。好，那首先呢，我们就马上邀请到主办单位经济日报刘永平社长为我们致辞。Now please welcome Mr. Alvin Liu, President of Economic Daily News, to deliver an opening remark. Welcome， 让我们一起欢迎刘社长。
行政院卓院长 Dr. Pizzaridis， 行政院公秘书长、财政部庄部长、行政院李发言人、华南金控李总经理、台湾经济研究院吴董事长、和库金控徐首席经济学家、华南投顾吕董事长、亚洲大学蔡校长，以及在座的各位来宾，大家早安，大家好。
好，
欢迎大家参加今天的大师论坛。经济日报从2007年开始，也就是我们40周年的那一年，开始举办大师论坛。今年已经进入第19年，我们共邀请了17位诺贝尔经济学奖得主，以及多位享誉国际的经济学家来台湾，分享他们的知识洞见，提出对台湾的建议，已经成为国内最受瞩目的年度论坛之一。今年我们非常荣幸邀请到2010年诺贝尔经济学奖得主皮萨里德斯教授来台。事实上，这是我们第2次邀请他来参加本论坛。在2011年，也就是他得到诺贝尔经济学奖的隔年，我们就曾经邀请他来台湾。当时的主题是欧债危机的成因与解方，就是当时非常火热的话题。那今年我们再度请到他，谈的更是当前大家全球都关心的川普时代的全球经济展望，想必大家都非常期待。那皮萨里德斯教授是塞浦路斯裔的英国人，目前任教于英国伦敦政经学院。他长期研究劳动市场失业与经济成长之间的关系。跟美国经济学者 Peter Diamond 还有 Dale Mortensen 在2010年一同获得诺贝尔经济学奖，为了表彰他们对搜寻摩擦理论的开创与贡献，深刻影响全球对就业市场政策的理解。他的研究不仅是学术价值卓越，同时也对各国政策实际实务有很多深远的影响。2025年，全球经济再度站在历史的十字路口。那川普总统的第2任期以让美国再度伟大， 对等关税为核心的贸易政策正掀起了一场全球的经济风暴。对台湾而言，挑战跟机遇是并存的。川普的政策可能会冲击我们的科技、传统产业，迫使企业重新布局全球的供应链。但是危机往往孕育机遇转机。台湾的科技实力与灵活应变能力及韧性，让我们有机会在这场变局中寻找到新的市场，开启新的合作机会、伙伴，甚至在科技自主的这个浪潮中成为不可或缺的伙伴。那关键在于如何以智慧还有战略来化挑战为跃升的跳板。今年的论坛就是扣紧着川普时代的全球经济展望主题。皮萨里德斯教授会为我们剖析这场变局的深远影响，指引方向。紧接着，行政院公秘书长将以台美关系为切入点，来探讨双赢的可能性。下午的场次，华硕的童子贤董事长则将从产业视角分享企业如何在风浪中掌舵前行。最后会由吴中书董事长引领这个我们的圆桌论坛，同时呢会汇聚皮萨里德斯教授、吕仁杰董事长、徐千庭首席经济学家，还有罗伟首席经济学家，共同来探讨贸易战下的风险与机遇。这场思想的交锋，相信会成为我们点亮前行的一个方向。特别感谢共同主办单位华南金控、合作金库银行以及协办的富邦金控、富兰克林华美投信、国泰世华银行、亚洲大学的鼎力支持，更感谢财政部多年以来的坚定支持相伴，让这场知识的盛宴得以持续的顺利进行。我们相信，唯有了解全球局势，深思应对策略，才能让台湾在动荡中站稳脚步，持续前行。祝福大家在今日的论坛中收获洞见，激发灵感。谢谢大家。
好，我们非常谢谢主办单位经济日报刘远平社长为我们所做的开场致辞，也请先回座，谢谢。紧接着呢，我们要邀请的就是今天的共同主办单位华南金控李耀清总经理来为我们致辞，掌声欢迎李总经理。Please welcome Mr. Robert Lee, Director and President of Huanan Financial Holdings, to give us a few words. Welcome.
.我们行政院卓院长、秘书长还有李发言人，我们经济日报的刘社长，那我们诺贝尔经济学大师Sir Christopher Pizarridis， 还有我们台湾经济研究院的吴中书董事长，那我们3位与谈人，还有现场的各位贵宾、媒体朋友们，大家好。那本人仅代表华南金控欢迎大家参加2025的一个大师论坛。那今天很荣幸能够邀请到我们皮萨里德斯教授，还有我们行政院的公秘书长以及和硕科技的童董事长来进行专题演讲。那这是一场齐聚我们学术、政府以及产业专家的一个大师论坛。那从各个面向来剖析美国川普总统重返白宫之后所带来的各项冲击，并提出因应之道。那川普总统今年上任以后，为了达到再次让美国伟大的一个这个目标，那他推动了多项美国优先的一个新政策。那这样一举改变了我们过往所熟悉的一个政治、经贸以及金融的一个运作模式，那加深了我们经济前景的一个不确定性。那再加上中美两国的一个大国博弈，升高了全球的一个地缘政治的一个风险。那面对这样子的一个国际政经新变局， 再加上我们近期人工智慧突破的一个发展，我们看到的不只是有危机，还有转机，那更有商机。那我们华南金融集团将以前瞻思维、稳健经营的理念来面对各项冲击，调整我们的经营策略，那并配合政府的一个政策来提供厂商各项协助，以利转型升级，并希望能够帮助国内产业顺利度过美国政策改变的一个阵痛期。那华南金控今天很荣幸能够跟经济日报共同主办今日的一个大师论坛，希望藉由今天各位专家的一个宝贵意见以及实务分享，能带给大家满满的收获。那最后预祝我们活动圆满顺利，那各位贵宾平安喜乐，谢谢大家。
好，非常谢谢华南金控的李总经理为我们所做的致辞，也请先回座，谢谢李总经理。好，紧接着呢，我们今天非常荣幸的邀请到我们一直支持我们的财政部庄翠云部长为我们上台致辞，掌声欢迎庄部长。Now please welcome Ms. 翠云庄, Minister of Ministry of Finance, to give us a few words. Welcome.
我们行政院卓院长、龚秘书长以及 Dr. Peter Readers， 还有经济日报的刘社长、华南金控李总经理以及在场的各位贵宾先进，大家早安。今天很荣幸受邀参加大师论坛的开幕盛会。首先要对联合报系长期关注台湾的经济发展，从2007年以来持续的举办论坛。每年呢，都邀请国际知名的经济学家来到台湾，分享对全球经济重要的观察，还有深入的分析，提供政策的建议。我们要在这里表达感佩以及感谢之意。美国川普总统上任以后，推动美国优先以及公平贸易为核心的政策，对全球多个国家加征对等关税，以及降低美国的贸易赤字，并且促使企业投资美国。那么牵动了全球的供应链重组以及资金的流向。目前，美国对等关税尚未底定，但是中东动荡的地缘政治风险再起，全球经济的不确定性升高。今天，皮萨里德斯教授以川普时代的全球经济展望为题，就川普的关税政策以及地缘政治风险提出对于全球经济结构的冲击和影响分析，并且和我们国内的专家学者对谈，格外的有意义。相信有助于掌握全球政经局势的脉动，让我们的产业在风险中发现转机，在挑战中谋求发展。我国是出口导向的经济体，美国是我国重要的经贸伙伴。2024年，我国对美国出口金额是1114亿美元，占了我们总体出口的23%，贸易顺差649亿美元。美国关税政策的调整将深深影响我国的产品出口以及产业的发展。那么，为了积极应对美国关税新局以及全球政经的挑战，赖总统在520的就职周年宣示，推动产业立足台湾，布局全球，以及加强和美国的经贸关系，深耕在地的供应链，提升产业的国际竞争力，来强化产业因应变局的能力。那么，本部依循赖总统以及行政院卓院长的产业对策方向，在税制方面，我们会持续的强化灵活性以及诱因的机制，协助企业调整体质。那么，产业创新条例完成修法后，那么增加人工智慧 以及节能减碳的投资抵减，提高投资支出的上限，延长租税优惠的适用期间，鼓励资本支出，来促进产业的升级转型。另外，为了要加速引导资金挹注新创企业，降低投资的门槛，来驱动产业创新以及经济的转型。在融资方面，我们会督导公股银行支持产业资金的需要，确保雨天不收伞，发挥银行挺企业的功能，透过贸易融资利息的减码，以及输出保费的优惠，来降低贸易风险以及扩大我们的外销市场。同时呢，我们会简化通关的程序，来减轻业者的行政成本，全力提升厂商的竞争的优势。另外，加强落实违规转运，我们要做好事前的预防、事中的严查，以及事后的严罚，3道防线的查处，让外国的货品无法冒充 MIT 洗产地。我们建立一个健康有序的贸易环境。在当前全球经济日益的变动、重重挑战之下，财政部将会持续透过审慎还有弹性的财政政策，引导产业升级转型，同时优化财政的治理，加速产业的发展，打造一个经济成长稳固的基础，创造繁荣的新台湾。最后，我要再次感谢经济日报、华南金控，还有我们合作金库银行，精心的规划这一次的论坛，提供企业、政府还有学界深入的探讨川普时代的全球经济动向，以及对我国产业的影响和机会。我们提出前瞻的观点与政策的启发。那么也预祝这一次的论坛能够圆满成功。那么各位在座的贵宾都健康愉快，谢谢大家，谢谢。
好，非常谢谢财政部庄部长为我们带来的勉励，也谢谢财政部一直支持带领着我们台湾的企业升级转型。请庄部长也可以先回座，谢谢。那紧接着呢，我们非常荣幸的今天邀请到行政院卓荣泰院长亲自莅临，让我们现在掌声欢迎卓院长上台致辞，掌声欢迎卓院长。Now please welcome Mr. 卓荣泰, Premier of Executive Yuan, to give us a few words. Welcome.
主办单位经济日报刘永平社长、华南金控李耀清总经理，还有合库投顾徐董事长，以及 Dr. Pizza Readers 行政院公秘书长、庄部长、李发言人，还有各位大师，大家早安。
好。
我今天早上一到行政院，我看到公秘书长手上摆的那份报纸，我只看到一半的标题，就是杨金荣看台币，升值预期可消除。他因为公秘书长是我们的总体经济专家。他一直更新，我只看到这一半。来到这里看到另外一半，杨金荣看台币升值预期应可消除，旁边那一半是 Pizza Readers 来了，我不知道这是不是有关联啊？然后我们的徐社长知道是有关联，不过很感谢经济日报常年不仅在日常报道上给予国人非常多的经济的知识。投资的管道的介绍，还有很多经济理论的分析，也主办这样一个有意义的大师论坛，更是带动国家向世界学习、看齐、共同进步的一项非常好的动力。今天非常特别的是，我们敬重的 Pizza Readers 教授能够来到台湾。2010年，他荣获诺贝尔奖之后，在世界各地都引起相当大的关注。尤其在今天，我们面对美国关税贸易的新政策，台湾 除了积极的与美方进行重要的谈判沟通过程之外，我们对我们自己本身的经济体制也要持续的强化跟改善。那这个时候，我们能够得到国际大师级来这里来加持、来引导，是跟我们共同讨论，是一种非常难得的可贵的一个事情。那么我也相信，2010年 Pisarides 教授他用他的搜寻摩擦跟配对函数的理论，让失业经济学跟劳动市场的政策跟他的理论，尤其是在就业流动跟失业影响这个探索方面，对全球的劳资关系、社会和谐都有稳定的深远的影响，也提供了进步的观点。2010年，他告诉了全世界这样一个重要性。今天台湾在2025年，我们2300万国人的努力，也是期望透过这种国际的交流，我们告诉全世界，台湾持续的确保在这里的稳定跟发展，让我们有持续稳定的科技的实力跟经济的实力，对全人类都是重要的。我们希望向世界来讲述台湾现在要告诉世界的这个故事。过去以来，我们从农村时代进到中小企业，进到我们的服务业，到现在的高科技业，台湾成为一股世界不可或缺的力量。我们对全人类的贡献，我们要有自信跟我们的韧性。所以行政院未来会在短暂的时间内，会提出一个 AI 的新10大建设。我认为这是未来人类新工程的重要破化。我期待这样的 AI 新10大的建设，能够带领台湾，无论是在各个方面，在技术、关键技术，在产业的能力，以及在基础建设方面，我们都能够有十足的发展。因此 ，AI 是成为国家未来重要的发展的一个方向。那受惠于 AI 跟高速运算的高速的发展，我们今年的对外的成长率、出口的成长率相当的好。我们第1季、第2季都呈现非常高的比例。1到5月，我们的出口成长高达24.3%，24.3%，这是一个相当高的一个指标，也象征的我们一直预期今年台湾的整年的经济成长率可以破3保3，我们预计到3.1%。那这个又会在一个目前是全世界经济政策不稳定的状态底下，台湾可以说我们看得出一个相当好的前景。这有助于过去我们的经济体制相当的完善，就在场各位从事不论是金融业、产业界各位大师长期以来努力的结果。那当前我们的挑战，也告诉我们，我们主要是在半导体的先进制程，我们也有财政稳健的一个状态，同时我们有坚强的净对外资产的对外关系，这个部位3个都是形成台湾强劲经济力的一个基石。未来行政院也会因应整个国际贸易的情势，我们会提出一个强化经济社会及国土安全韧性的特别条例，之后我们会持续提出特别预算。那这个特别条例目前在立法院审议当中，我们期待产业界共同发出我们的声音。从4月3号美国关税宣布新的政策之后，虽然4月9号开始90天的暂缓，但现在已经到了暂缓之前大家紧锣密鼓谈判的过程。但是我们国家对于产业支持的方案还停留在书面的作业，我们特别条例、特别预算都还没有通过。我们希望大家能够帮政府、帮国人、帮产业加一把劲，让我们尽快能够通过，让我们的对于支持产业、安定就业，还有照顾民生，还有国土的安全韧性4个方向都能够全面的来发展，也让企业界能够稳健的经营，让民众的负担能够减轻，让国土能够增加韧性。而就中长期而言，美国新关税的政策带动全球供应链的移转，这个是一个相当大的，在地缘政治变化之后，供应链的重组跟移转，台湾会掌握这个契机， 我们不仅对内会加速我们的 AI 应用的导入，我们会协助我们的高科技持续的在世界占领领先的地位，而更重要的是，我们会用最大的能量来帮助我们的中小微企业继续进行净零转型、数位转型这个双轴转型，同时也帮我们的中小企业能够打通国内外的各项通路。这个就是我们在对我们中小企业多元竞争方案当中，我们提出的多项的措施。那未来我刚刚说过的，我们的 AI 新10大建设，在智慧应用、关键技术以及基础建设各方面，我们会投入相当大的人力物力，跟国家整个的研发的团队等等。我们期待在2040年，我们能够创造15兆的产值，跟产生50万的高薪就业的机会。这个是一个非常大的计划。目前国科会、国发会正跟行政院所有的部会正全面的在研议这样的 AI 新10大的工程。我们未来具体完成之后，紧接着会通过我们在下个月秘书长正在紧锣密鼓筹办的我们新一次的行政院经济发展委员会当中，跟经济发展委员会所有的委员顾问再次的能够得到他们的更多的意见支持跟肯定，我们向全国人民会共同提出这一项划时代、大时代的新建设。因此，加上我们现在已经在工作的发展过程当中，包括亚洲资产管理中心，包括多元投资国家的造园投资国家的方案，这2个加上人力方面的我们国家人才竞争力的提升方案等等，都会形成未来我们在资本市场、在人力市场全面的发展。这也是我们告诉大家，过去1年来，在赖总统的主政底下，我们从健康台湾、均衡台湾到团结台湾，以后我们会将台湾奠定成为一个 AI 科技智慧岛，会让全世界对台湾再次引领世界，等待我们的发展。持续我们在对美的关系当中，我们除了加强过去的台湾贸易投资中心的设置之外，我们还会持续研发现在大家非常有兴趣的科技园区的这种服务园区的工作，希望把我们的科技业也带向全世界，形成总统所说的立足台湾、布局全球，还有加强美国的这样的工作。所以今天很希望我们在大师论坛当中得到世界级大师的这种加持，让各位都能够如沐春风、感同身受，也让大家一同为台湾国内的产业持续的加码，我们也跟世界做强化的连结。我相信台湾稳定，世界就会安定；台湾和平，世界就会发展。我们跟世界同步进行。谢谢大家，感谢各位。
好，非常谢谢卓院长的勉励，也请先帮我们留步舞台。紧接着我们要邀请我们的贵宾还有讲者到舞台上，我们要一同来进行大合照。So right now, we'd like to welcome our guests of honors and our speakers to join us on stage for a group photo. Now, first of all, we'd like to welcome Professor Christopher Pissarides, Professor of Economics at the London School of Economics. Please join us on stage for a group photo. 紧接着，非常荣幸的邀请到行政院龚明鑫秘书长帮我们到舞台上来。那秘书长在稍后呢，也会是我们专题讲座的主讲人。那同时，我们也再次的邀请到财政部庄翠云部长也帮我们到舞台上，以及我们行政院的李惠芝发言人。有请我们庄部长还有李发言人。那同时也有请今天的主办单位华南金控李耀清总经理帮我们到舞台上来。好，以及我们今天的圆桌座谈的主持人，台湾经济研究院吴中书董事长，来有请吴董事长，我们小心脚步，谢谢。同时呢，我们也要有请到我们今天的座谈的与谈人 or panelists， 我们合库金控集团首席经济学家暨合库投顾的徐千婷董事长，有请徐董事长也到舞台上来。接下来欢迎华南投顾吕仁杰董事长，有请吕董事长，以及我们的协办单位亚洲大学的蔡金发校长也帮我们到舞台上。最后我们有请主办单位经济日报刘永平社长也到舞台上来。 好，那我们呢，请贵宾们看一下，我们要往中间靠拢一些吗？好，那我们请贵宾帮我们向中央稍微靠拢一些。好，帮我们看一下中央的摄影师。好，来，3, 2, 1 ，Please look at the photographer and the center, right in front of you. 3, 2, 1。我们也请需要补画面的媒体朋友直接帮我们举手好吗？我们后方的媒体朋友需要画面吗？那帮我们看一下我们后方的媒体朋友好吗 ？Please look at all the photographers in the back of the venue, please. 3, 2, 1。我们有没有哪一边的媒体朋友需要补的？好，前面这边再一张是不是 ？One more to the center。来，我们再看一下中央。好，大家都捕捉到了珍贵的画面了吗？好，需要补画面直接帮我们举手。好，谢谢。那我们也非常感谢舞台上的长官贵宾，我们请先帮我们留步。那我们也再次的掌声，谢谢卓院长今天的莅临。那我们今天呢，院长因为有药物在身，所以我们也先掌声，谢谢卓荣泰院长今天莅临我们2025的大师论坛，也为我们在今天的一开场呢做了非常多的致辞和勉励，非常感谢我们今天的卓院长的莅临，谢谢。那同时呢，我们也谢谢所有的贵宾，也请先回座。And Professor Pisarides, you please remain. Well, yeah, because we're going to proceed to no walking. Yeah, let's try to rest a little bit before the master keynote. Walking is good. Exercise. 哦，我们卓院长呢，也请我们今天大师论坛的这个大师 Professor Pisarides 在我们的这个今天的 agenda 上面呢签下大名。Thank you， 谢谢，非常谢谢卓院长。All right， 那我们接下来呢，马上就要进入到今天的主题了，就是我们这个大师论坛的第一场专题讲座，题目会是川普时代的全球经济展望。So right now we're going to proceed to our first master keynote, Global Economic Outlook in the Trump Era. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Christopher Pisarides, Professor of Economics at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Professor Pisarides. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, I'm really pleased to be here for the second time. Last time I was here was 2011. The pictures you see around you, actually, I think they were taken in 2011, 14 years ago. So I wonder, I bet I still look the same in 15 years from now, so I hope you invite me back. We live in difficult times, and we had AI to deal with. We came out of COVID. Geopolitics were worsening, and supply chains were changing in straight ways. So we economists, at least, were concerned to see where AI was leading to, what was happening to jobs. There were so many people saying there would be no jobs left. Others were saying, no, AI would increase our productivity. Others that it will not. It's such difficult issues. And as if that wasn't enough, suddenly Donald Trump appears at the presidency of the United States and changes the tune completely and introduces new confusions about international trade, which is something that has been like our sacred cow for the last 40 years. It's been getting more and more liberal. So what I was asked to say today is what is happening to the global economy with these politics that are being followed. When I was saying in Premier Cho, in fact, talked a lot about AI, and Taiwan is right at the frontier, of course, as we know, and long may it stay there. But the problem with AI, as you all know, is that every day there's something new, it's changing. But with Donald Trump, it's every hour that is something new almost, and we have to adapt what we know about it. So that's what I'll try and do over the next 45 minutes. let's figure out how. Okay, I have a kind of main theme that runs through the presentation, and then I'll be more specific in a minute. And the main theme that I want you to take away is that what Trump was doing in his first presidency in 2017, it was already different from before and a kind of more revolutionary, if you like, and it was bringing fundamental changes to both to the United States economy and to the global economies. Of course, he was also changing the way politics was done. As you know, we had the demonstrations afterwards and all that, but that's more politics and I will not get into it. I will talk more about the economic implications. Now, the policies he was pursuing back then introduced various risks in the global economy, but it's fair to say that those risks didn't cause any serious problems. The economy was resilient enough to absorb any changes that he was making. But now in his second presidency, he reinforced those risks. He added to those risks rather than try and find sort of hedging policies, if you like. And we are running risks now, I think, in the world economy. We don't really know where they're going, and we could speculate later on. And the worst that we're facing now, to be honest, is the last sentence that you see on the slide, that the way he's going, there doesn't seem to be a credible end game. Like you might ask, where is this leading to? And no one can give you a very precise answer. And when you don't have a target, then you're always running the risk that you might go, of course, somewhere along the way. Now, the topics that I want to talk more specifically about, the main theme that I've just outlined, is first of all, what are the new policies and what are the risks that I was talking about? Then I will talk about the implications. That would be rather brief section. Then I will talk about the implications of those for the global economy. What's the global economy doing right now? Then about the United States economy being the leading economy in the world that influences so many other economies. What is happening in the US? That's a big concern, of course, and not just for the financial sector. And then, if we have time, which I think we probably will have time, unless I start mumbling about individual points, are there any other reasons that we should be concerned about in the global economy other than new US policies? And in my view, the answer is yes, there are. Now, in new policies and risks then, the key, to understand the key risk is that we have to understand what America First means. When he first came on, wearing the baseball cap with America First on it, we thought, many of us at least, thought that it was electioneering. But in fact, it's not just electioneering. It's been his driving principle. It was pointed out by two speakers before briefly, so there's obviously awareness here. But I'm not sure everyone is very aware of what it means in American policy. And what it means is that America will take action, despite the fact that it's such an influential economy in the whole world. In fact, it sort of drives the whole world, like the saying that America sneezes and the whole world catches a cold is not far off the truth. You only need for America to sidestep somehow and the whole world starts getting worried. In fact, Trump doesn't care about that. What he cares about is America's interests. Anything that he does and perceives is that he would do it if he perceives it to be in America's interest, whatever other nations will think. And that, of course, holds in the military sphere, in the political, and especially in the economic, because he thinks that America is so more powerful than everyone else, so superior, that it doesn't have to worry about the reaction of the rest of the world. That's the main risk that we're facing, I believe. What he doesn't realize, of course, is that although America is the biggest economy in the world, it depends on global on the global economy as well. If the global economy is doing well, then there will be positive spillovers onto the United States economy. It cannot go it alone, it cannot isolate. Now, the first implication of that, which I think is probably the most dangerous as far as what the world is going to, is that multilateralism is not a good policy. In other words, he doesn't like negotiating with many countries at the same time. He doesn't like negotiating in international financial or other economic institutions. What he wants to do is to negotiate with each country individually, with unilateralism or bilateralism, I should say, rather than multilateralism. And of course, the way that he approaches that is as any business person will approach. You know, if you're negotiating with a competitor, or if you're negotiating with customers, you don't want to do it all. You know, you don't want to put them all in a room and tell them what to do. You take one at a time. The advantage here that he perceives in America is that America is obviously more powerful than any other individual country or agent in the global economy. Therefore, if he negotiates with only one person, he will come out as winner. America will win in the sense of America comes first. Whereas with multilateralism, if it's something that he will want to do in the United Nations or in the World Trade Organization, he might be outvoted. And that's the principle behind the bilateralism that we're now seeing more and more. The implication of that is that it could easily break or weakens multilateral agreements and renegotiate one-on-one. We've seen that in the way he pulled out of USAID, so there's no point in giving money through countries or something. Maybe he will negotiate with one country and help that one country if he feels like it. He pulls out of climate agreements, the Paris Accord, the Pacific Rim Agreement was scrapped, the Atlantic Partnership, NAFTA, and the ones he hasn't been able to because they're too fundamental in the security of the world, like NATO, European Union, United Nations, World Trade Organization, they are weak. You know, he spoke several times against the European Union, as if, you know, why does he care what we do in Europe? But he keeps saying, you know, this is not a good thing. He wants to negotiate separately with Germany, France, United Kingdom, or something, not with one that is all the European nations together. NATO, he keeps repeating that he might pull out and Europeans shouldn't expect the support from America as it's been having in the past. Of course, Europeans have panicked because of the war in Ukraine, and they are negotiating how to increase their spending on defense, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, forget all these international agreements. They mean nothing. Just see what is coming out on one-on-one. Now, that's the main risk in my view, and that's the one that introduces most uncertainties. Now, other key policies that have been driving United States policy now is that he likes protectionism from international competition. He thinks that international competition is taking jobs away from Americans, and if you protect the country from international competition, they will come back, and he likes tariffs as a way of doing that. Apparently, the reason for liking tariffs, from what I heard from American friends who would know, is that, as you probably know, income tax was not introduced in the world until fairly recently. And before that, the way governments were financing themselves was through tariffs on trade. It was all trade taxes. Trade taxes have a much longer history than income tax or corporate tax. So Trump said, well, you know, over so many centuries, governments survived on trade taxes. Why can't we do it now? And that's how it switched. It came in his first presidency, actually. There are tax cuts at home, there is deregulation, and there is selective industrial policies like encouraging fossil fuel companies in Texas or big tech in California and so on. Now, what are the implications of all these policies for the global economy? First, protectionism. Protectionism is obviously bad for trade, that's the whole point of it. And it's not only that tariffs are high, but it's also the fact that there is uncertainty about them. We don't know where they are. One day they're on, another day they're off, another time they're postponed, they're renegotiated, differential tariffs across the globe. We know that companies need certainty to invest. If you see the taxes you pay, which is part of your cost, go up one day, come down another, they're postponed, then you hold back on your investment to see where it's going to settle down. And we haven't seen that happen yet. So investment is being affected. Trading partners throughout the world, they're scared to talk against it or take revenge for fear that there will be even bigger revenge from America. China is the exception here because they stood up to him. Now, as you probably know, they used the formula, the US administration, to calculate tariffs. That formula has no economic basis whatsoever. It's almost like something they pulled out of nowhere. So you might as well think of them as numbers that come into his head, without any justification. He is also having unpredictable reactions to other countries' policies. He, like some says, okay, these are good guys, let's only keep the tariff at 10%. Other, he says, these are bad guys, let's raise it to 25%. It's this kind of uncertainty that is everywhere in there. Now, my heading is why China, but the why is wrong. Why, you might say, why is China the one that stood up to him and said, well, if you are going to raise it, we're going to raise it as well. So the question really, and the reason really, I think, is that the impact on the Chinese economy from tariffs is not likely to be much, despite what you hear and say. Chinese, if you look at the statistics, Chinese exports are about 20% of GDP. It used to be 25% a few years ago, but now it's only 20% because there is an increased domestic consumption. Now, of the exports, 15% go to the United States and 20% go to Europe. So exports to the United States are only about 3% of Chinese GDP. And with a size of the economy that it has and the connections that it's now building up with other Southeast Asian countries, it's just not a big number to worry about it. So instead of becoming an economic issue and worrying about that, it becomes a geopolitical issue. They are standing up to him because he's provoking and he's getting a response. It's as if economics doesn't come into it. It's not very much for the United States economy. It's not very much for the Chinese economy. They are too big to worry about this tariff between them. It will affect, of course, negatively exporters, certain sectors like cross-border platform trading, for example, would be affected. But when you look at the economy as a whole, it's not something that we should worry about. It's much more worrying what's happening with others that are more important partners like Canada, Mexico, European Union. There would be economic implications there. There are, of course, caveats to what I just said. It's not that simple. And the main one, I think, is about supply chains. Supply chains are badly affected. There were some ridiculous results which are now being exempted, actually, which is that, as you know, smartphones designed in California and assembled in China. Just imagine the situation if there was a 100% tariff on them, that Californians would send the design electronically, so they are not traded goods. They are not subject to tariffs. And then when they import back the assembled phones, they are products, so they have to pay 100% on it. So it's like America designs the smartphone, sends it to China for assembling, comes back and pays twice as much because of the 100% tax. I mean, those would be ridiculous things affecting American producers much more than anyone else. I think the smartphones have been exempted from these tariffs, actually, for that reason. But anyway, supply chains generally would be affected, and that is obviously going to have negative results on China. But it will take time. Supply chains are not assembled and disassembled immediately. Chinese exporters are already switching to Europe and other Asia, and it's an obvious strategy to follow. Europeans started worrying about it, about the competition. First, there are some indications that they might react. Now they have other concerns on their mind. I don't think it's likely anything very serious to happen. So we should expect to see reswitching of exports. And the implications for trade is that trading nations are uncertain about where they stand, especially small open economies. It's affecting mainly the industries of traded goods because services are excluded. And I guess the main reason services are excluded from these tariffs is that America is a big exporter of services, but it's also a lot more difficult to identify what the cost of an exported service is. I just mentioned the design of smartphones. That's the export of a service. How do you tax it? It's difficult. There is stock market volatility. There are big falls in stocks of open nations. They're down, up all the time. There is currency volatility, inflation, threats at home. Altogether, it's bad for trade and it's bad for uncertainty. The implications for the supply chains is that there is restructuring of supply chains based on differential levels of tariffs. Overall, supply chains are becoming less attractive anyway because of new technologies. With AI, we could bring things at home. During COVID, the trust that nations had on each other broke down because there was no collaboration involved or even information given about lockdowns, which is having sort of after effects. Therefore, we see more onshoring coming now rather than the offshoring that is characterizing supply chains. And this process here is mainly affecting countries that benefited from the location of multinational companies, China, of course, being the primary country that received these multinationals. Now, implications of monetary policy are they're quite serious, I think, although, monetary policy is not effective as fiscal policy, I guess, in disrupting actual flows, but it is important. We know that the best kind of monetary policy to do is to give independence to the central bank, and its policy should be driven by domestic needs, especially fighting inflation and ensuring that there's monetary stability, fighting instability. Now, with Trump's policies, the monetary policies are now driven by international volatility, exchange rates, implications for domestic prices through changes in exchange rates and changes in tariffs. Many people think of tariffs as causing inflation. Of course, it's not inflation they're causing, it's readjustment of relative prices. But that might be built into expectations of future prices, into interest rates, and it will require monetary policy. And therefore, the way that monetary policy should be dealing with this is, on the one hand, focusing on its domestic objectives, mainly fighting inflation and stability, as I mentioned. But on the other hand, central banks should be collaborating with foreign central banks to coordinate this international spillover of effects from America's policies. But the mere collaboration of central banks goes against the America First policy because it's multilateralism. You talk to many people at the same time, many central bankers. And that is a big problem. Currently, there isn't much going on. I've just been to a financial forum in Shanghai, and obviously many monetary policy experts who talked were rather concerned about that and what should be done. My view is that there should be given a stronger role for international financial institutions like the Bank for International Settlements, especially, and the IMF, and hope that the US Fed would go along. I expect it will go along as long as the current leadership of Powell remains there, but then we have one more year because in next May, the governor of the Fed is changing. So the overall impact then is that over the last 30 years, globalization was at the core of global growth. Now, US policy is reversing it. Bilateralism and the traffic threat and the tariff threats is taking its place, which is not good for the world economy, and international institutions are revising their growth forecasts downward. Altogether, the uncertainty combined with tariffs is driving that. Now, the current revisions are not very big, but they are all downward. I don't think anyone has revised upward. They vary between 0.1 and 0.5%, in other words, half of 1%. So if the previous forecast was 3%, the current is 2.5, that kind of effect. What's more important, I believe, is the disruption to the growth factors that were ongoing at the time and they were associated with globalization. That's really bad news for emerging economies, much more than the advanced economies. For the advanced economies, it's bad news for multinationals, but then they come back home and carry on in the same way. But it's not good for Africa, South America, and several countries in Southeast Asia. We need to find another model to work with rather than the globalization model that's been going on since 1980. What that is going to be is, well, not anyone's guess, but there's still some guesswork involved. Now, what are the political implications for that? I talked a lot about I talked about the economic mainly. I'm talking as a European now, I should say, because there are serious political implications that concern Europe. European allies are concerned about Trump's apparent lack of support for NATO and the European Union. And the main reason they're concerned is the war in Ukraine, which, we talked about these policies not having an end game. If there is one war that has absolutely no end game, is Ukraine. What do you expect the end of that war to be? No one knows. Trump promised that he will end it in 24 hours, and he's more or less given up. They're just killing each other daily. And that needs a strong Ukraine, which now belongs to the Western European group. And if America is not going to support NATO, who is going to provide it? There's no doubt that it has to be provided by NATO, supported by Europeans, and that's what they are trying to do now. His strong support for Israel and the complete lack of compassion for Palestinians is beginning to alienate or at least draw distance from European allies. We already had that fairly high-profile joint communique from Britain, Canada, Norway, and one other country that I cannot think of now, against that Israel should stop bombing indiscriminately Gaza. We had sanctions against 2 Israeli members of parliament because they were encouraging the government to continue with this bombing. That hasn't gone down very well, either with America or with Israel, obviously. Trading partners are worried about his lack of support for the WTO, although the WTO is mainly concerned with dispute resolution. He doesn't want this multilateral organization to be concerned with dispute resolution. And altogether, his sort of readiness, if you like, to ignore international agreements, make things worse with America as a peacemaker internationally, because if he's breaking agreements, then why not individual countries breaking their agreements? Not a very optimistic scenario. What about the future? Well, it gets very difficult trying to guess where the future is leading to. One thought that I had, and I discussed it with some others actually, but I don't know, maybe it's a little bit outlandish, is that is what's going to happen to emerging countries, emerging economies, I should say. They obviously benefit by being close to one or more of the advanced nations or alliances because of mutual aid, because of trade. In terms of economic development, emerging economies would benefit a lot if they're attached to some kind of trading, free trade area or something like that. But if America is going for unilateralism or even isolationism through Trump, America is not the country to be attached to. One day it might be your friend, next day you might be hit with tariffs. So where are they going to go? For geopolitical reasons, it's not very likely, I think, that they would be attached to China if they belong before to the Western alliances and unions. So what is a likely scenario? And of course, Europe is the one that is left in the middle. It seems to be a good middle ground that can step in and form alliances with the emerging nations. But unfortunately, it's not united enough to be in it. And of course, where you see the absence of a united Europe that could step in and help economically is that there is no obvious leadership. You know, who's going to lead Europe into these new alliances? It's sort of, you know, Germany doesn't have, which is a stronger economy, doesn't have a completely stable, confident government. Macron is trying. Starmer and Britain are outside the European Union now, although they're very much part of Europe economically. So although it sounds a good scenario, and it will benefit both Europe and the global economy, and especially the global South, it's unlikely to happen quickly. But if I were Trump and dictating what others should do, I would say this is the best scenario altogether. You know, just go for the middle ground, and it's a powerful enough economy, and we do have many nice things in Europe, by the way. It's not only our economy. Okay, now what about U.S. domestic policy? I was worried that I might run out of things to say during my time, but I think I'm going to run out of time, so I have to speed up a little bit. Now you might ask, what are tariffs good for? You know, what would an economist tell you about tariffs? And the answer that you will get is that tariffs are good as protection of infant industry until the country finds comparative advantage. We have been known, in fact, since 1830, since David Ricardo, that trade should be driven by comparative advantage. Everyone benefits if you do that. But new countries, emerging industries, small industries in new countries cannot keep up with the competition of the mature ones. Therefore, it makes sense to impose tariffs, protect them until they grow. Now, America doesn't have infant industry. I mean, it has the most mature industry in the world. So it obviously doesn't need tariffs. Tariffs are not good for American industry. For America First policy, tariffs are just good as a political tool, not an economic. Put competitors down, and there's a source of revenue. And then being who he is, Trump, and being in the Republican Party, revenue is good because then you can use it to fund tax cuts. And there are already a lot of revenues going to the Treasury in the United States. Corporation tax was cut in the first term from 35% to 21%, is still there. Some tax relief was given to individuals. They increased spending, especially during COVID, which they did not match with tax revenue. They just increased the debt. Tariff revenue at that time was not enough. Debt went up, and inequality went up. It was very bad social policies, if you like, if you give them a social interpretation. And you can see here what's happening to American debt, which is another very high risk, that It was 60% up to the financial crisis of 2008. It's now 120%. And the bill that is going now through Senate, that is being given various titles, is going to make it worse, because the tariff revenue is not enough to fund all the tax cuts that are being debated. Some of you may have come across something known as the Mar-a-Lago Accord. I don't want to use, it's a family show, so I don't want to use language that I would normally use in private to describe the policy, but it's a crazy policy. I mean, like, it's the expectation that that the dollar should depreciate for various reasons, and then what the accord is saying is that they should put pressure on other countries to appreciate their currencies so that the dollar effectively depreciates. But why would they do it? I mean, and anyway, the value of the dollar, the value of the currency, as we know, is determined by fundamentals. There might be short-term fluctuations that finance people moving in and out of assets might take advantage of, but those are more or less zero-sum games. But in the longer term, medium to longer term, the value of a currency is influenced by fundamentals. And if the dollar is going to give up its role of a reserve international currency, which is what the Mar-a-Lago Accord is really about, then who is going to take the role of an international reserve currency? The RMB, obviously not, because it's not internationalized. The euro, obviously not, because Europe is too fragmented. It would not have it as an international currency. The yen, no, because Japan has even bigger debts than America, and it's too small an economy nowadays in the international context. And therefore, there's nothing else. You cannot create a vacuum as a reserve currency to depreciate the dollar and reduce the debt. If you want to reduce the debt, just tax your people and use them to pay the debt. It's simple. Anyway. So now let's be a little bit realistic about the history of the debt. Is that the biggest increase has taken place during the financial crisis up to 2016. You can see that here actually. You can see the big rise was between 2008 and 2012, in fact, which I think was the Obama presidency, wasn't it, at that time? And then it took another big spur during COVID, which hasn't been reversed, and that was the Trump policies of the time. The current policies are sustaining it, and they're predicted to increase it, but something will give. Is it the dollar? Is it the stock market? And when will it happen? That's another big uncertainty. That's a problem of your finance people, I'm afraid, not the labor economies. It's because it would be a short-term problem. Now, what about deregulation? Well, Trump's policies removed any restrictions on business-related regulation that freed entrepreneurial spirits, of course, which was good for the economy, but it encouraged mainly the big techs, more wealthy sections of society. It did nothing for workers and poorer households who haven't seen their living standards rise. Returns to venture capital investments have benefited, especially in California. Currently, the US attracting 60% of global venture capital, American, European, and other foreign. China comes second at 12%. It's a massive difference, and that 60% is going into AI investments and development. So talking about leading AI nations, there's no reason. There is no doubt as to where all the money is going to. It's all being absorbed by California. Europe, of course, now with the Draghi report of September 2024, is trying to find ways of keeping at least European capital in Europe. In Europe, venture capital is completely fragmented between countries. United Kingdom, Germany are the leading ones, but then all the other countries have a little bit. If you add up all the European venture capital investors together, they come to about the same level as China, about 12%. But now it's fragmented, and as soon as a startup succeeds in Europe, migrates to California or Massachusetts. And that's what the Draghi report is about, that it will be very difficult to succeed. The social impact is that he's creating social tensions with his policies. Low wages are stagnating. The opioid epidemic is spreading and is reducing the supply of labor, especially of prime-age, working-age males withdrawing from the labor force. This, I think we're going to talk about this in the panel later. In this second term, he has a strong anti-immigration policy, anti-diversity, war on universities, excessive number of executive presidential orders, different way of running the country than we had before. There are more tensions. We're beginning to see demonstrations taking place, like the recent ones in Los Angeles. And the uncertainty is just not good for the economy. And the environment, of course, he's given up completely on environmental policies. Is bound to come back to haunt us. What about investment? Investments will be affected by the uncertainty, mainly, that we're facing. We already talked about that. And generally, the policy is losing credibility. We know that credibility in policy is important, and it wins. One of the most famous recent insights in economics is something known as the timing consistency. This is when a policy is changed despite earlier commitments that it wouldn't change. And usually that's response to the outcomes of the policy. I don't like this policy anymore, therefore I'm going to change it. Trump is doing that all the time. And that normally leads to lower growth and long time to get back to credibility. So that's a serious risk. Now, are there any other reasons for globalization reversals? No. Was Trump helped in these policies against globalization? There are some other global factors that coincided with Trump's policies that were pushing against globalization. I wouldn't say that Trump was pushing through an open door when he gave up multilateralism, but it was certainly helped by global international conditions. And I've listed 3 of them here. The first one is was known as the fourth industrial revolution, which is robotics and AI, that made it possible to automate many processes done by low-wage labor, and so reduce the advantages of locating some activities in lower-wage countries. Given the new technologies are hidden in clouds and computers, there's a lot of industrial espionage going on, stealing each other's ideas when they don't use their own clouds. And cybersecurity is a very big issue, especially between the United States and China, but also other countries involved. And that is making companies develop cold feet about supply chains and globalization. After all, when you look now at what's driving globalization, what's driving is really technology. It's not a low-cost labor, it's human capital. I mentioned just a minute ago that Silicon Valley is attracting a lot of companies. Silicon Valley has the most expensive wages in the world, and yet companies want to go and set up their supply chains through there. That's an indication of what's known as the knowledge economy. They want to go where the knowledge is, where the information about new technologies is, and where all the money, the venture capital is being invested. So it's a fair thing to say that, it's written with red, in fact, that the new technologies enable supply chain reversals at low cost or even benefit to large companies. Second is the military conflicts, especially the one in Ukraine and Europe, which stopped the supply of cheap Russian oil, is caused what's known as the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, especially in Europe, but also elsewhere. If there was inflation, COVID support spending and energy prices, they held back European growth. Further than that, what's the future there? Well, again, as I said before, it's not very optimistic because we don't know when it's all going to end. and the Middle East is making things worse with oil. Oil prices are volatile. So the uncertainties about military conflicts are holding growth back as well. And trade, which is a big problem. And finally, of course, the geopolitics. In 1980s, they warmed up. There was an influx of American investments in technology in China and other Asian countries. It helped both American and Western European companies take advantage of low labor costs in China. Of course, now labor costs in China are not that low and they're not important anymore because these processes have been automated. That's another big error that Trump is making, that he's saying that before we used to have lots of well-paid blue-collar jobs in the United States and we lost them all because of competition from China and other countries. But in fact, the reason they were lost is not competition, it's the new technology that lost them. And they will not come back, obviously, with tariffs, so you can forget that one too. Again, that what's happening with geopolitical situation is not good for the economy, it's bad for trade and supply chains, as well as sentiments towards each other and trust when you're trading. And therefore, we end up with these brief conclusions. Incredibly, my timer here says I have 1 minute left. And it will take 1 minute to tell you what the main conclusion is. That my main concern, at least, is the departure of Trump from multilateralism and pursuing protectionism is affecting negatively trade and global growth, along with many other things. This uncertainty is created by frequent policy changes, not good for investment, which is suffering. Global economic relations will need to restructure, but these changes take long to have an effect, and the uncertainty will continue. It looks like onshoring is taking the place of offshoring, assisted by AI and other technologies. And what China does and what Europe does as the other two big global economies will be absolutely key, but it's not quite clear, A, what they want to do, and B, what they are capable of doing in contrast to what Trump is doing. You might say, well, Trump is only going to be there another 3 years. Well, expect J.D. Vance, according to my American friends, because the Democrats are so divided. You know, they need to find a good candidate if it's going to change. Well, thank you very much. I have 3 seconds left.
Thank you so much, Professor Pistorides. Thank you so much for the really informative and wonderful sharing. Thank you.
What do I do? Walk down that way?
This way? Yeah. Either way you like. Thank you so much for the informative sharing. I know there's so much to share in the limited time, but we have a panel discussion in the afternoon. So Professor Pistorides will join us for the panel for more discussion in the afternoon. And right now, I would like to invite Professor Pistorides as well as President Tsai of Asia University, along with other faculty and students, to proceed to meeting room 203A for an exclusive face-to-face dialogue with the masters. 我们现在呢，在进入下一阶段之前，要先有请亚洲大学的蔡进发校长带领着我们的这个师生到203A 的会议室，待会会跟我们的大师，我们今天 Pistorides 教授来进行一个面对面的大师对谈。那接下来呢，我们会在场内继续进入到非常精彩的第2场的专题演讲，题目就是一样紧扣在川普2.0之下，台湾经济的一个新布局。